Thirsty Cam, who is being thirsty again, for reasons unknown. But good evening, how are we all this fine night? We are going to be doing as you guys have requested, and we're going to start reading some works of Edgar Allan Poe. It's quite warm in here, yes. Thank you, Rabbit, for gifting Zern a sub. Very kind of you. Let's start this off with, hopefully this is not too loud. We got a little bit of background music going for you all. So it's not just purely my dulcet tones. You make the outfit. That's because you're obsessed, Vit. We know you're obsessed. So yes, this evening, morning, night, wherever you may be in the world, this particular time, we're going to do some reading of the complete tales of Edgar Allan Poe. First thing I'm going to do is get a drink, because I am a little bit frog and throaty. It's not me putting on a voice, it's generally just me having a frog in my throat. So yes, welcome all. There's not much to really say or to get doing. This is very loud for me, hopefully it's not too loud for you. It is getting very loud. Let's turn that bad boy down a little bit. Why are you so loud? It's supposed to be background music. There we go. Hopefully that's a lot better for you guys. You know, let me know if there's a bunch of songs on this playlist. It's going to change. Hopefully they're all audio leveled. If they're not, let me know and I will try to adjust on the fly. But yes, so the complete tales and poems of Edgar Allan Poe. And thank you, Nicole, for trying to make me eat cake. Yes, so let's dive in, shall we? And obviously we cannot possibly read Edgar Allan Poe without the first and foremost going to everyone's favourite, The Raven. Ironically labelled miscellaneous poems? I would not have expected it to be miscellaneous. Now, if I can get to the back, and then we shall begin. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. Sir, said I, or Madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping, tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortals ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped the stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but, with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Pardon me. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is, on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marvelled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on that placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, Other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, Nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster to this song's one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore. But the raven, still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. That was The Raven, which anyone who knows Edgar Allan Poe probably knows that one. Maybe a couple of us. We might find out when we reach the short stories. I figured, we'll read another story now. Sorry, a story, not a poem now. And then we'll go back to a poem and sort of interspace between them. I have a list here of short stories recommended by Nicole, probably the most notorious Edgar Allan... Notorious? Yes, notorious Edgar Allan Poe fan. If she could, she'd go back... If she could go back in time just once, I'm pretty certain she'd go back to Poe to listen to him recite his own poem. Aw, poor sausage. I'm glad it's making you feel better. And yes, Nicole, you do not want to be stressed. Work is over. I know it's can't switch off and you've got work tomorrow, but for now, no work. And sausage, let me regale you with tales upon tales, and hopefully you'll feel better. And yes, hugs everybody. Let's go for... I don't know. Which one should we go for? We have the good old-fashioned Telltale Heart. We have Premature Burial. The Sphinx. Never Bet the Devil. 4 Beasts in One. 3 Sundays. I'm inclined to see this 4 Beasts in One. Now, where would I find that one? I feel this music has somehow gone a little bit more upbeat. which is not quite what we need. This might be a little bit more fitting for where we're going. Now, where is... They're not in alphabetical. 4 beasts in 1. I found you. Now, let's hope that with most of Poe's works there are no horrendous words that I'm going to have to try and pronunciate on the fly. Because there's enunciating and there's Poe. And I do apologise if you see me collapse. It's simply because the man does not know what a full stop is. Okay. 4 beasts in 1. The Homo camel-leopard. Camel-leopard? Camel-leopard. However you wish to pronounce that. Cacen Accesvertus. By Crébillon's Xerxes. Antiochus Epiphanes is very generally looked upon as the Gog of the prophet Ezekiel. This honour is, however, more properly attributable to Cambyses, the son of Cyrus, and indeed the character of the Syrian monarch does by no means stand in need of any adventitious embellishment. His ascension to the throne, or rather his usurpation of the sovereignty, 171 years before the coming of Christ, his attempt to plunder the temple of Diana of Ephesus, his implacable hostility to the Jews, his pollution of the Holy of Holies, and his miserable death at Taba after a tumultuous reign of 11 years are circumstances of a prominent kind, and therefore more generally noticed by the historians of his time than the impious, dastardly, cruel, silly, and whimsical achievements which make up the sum total of his private life and reputation. Ooh, we've already had big words. Hopefully there's no more. Let us suppose, gentle reader, that is now the year of the world 3830. And let us, for a few minutes, imagine ourselves at the most grotesque habitation of man, the remarkable city of Antioch. To be sure, there were, in Syria and other countries, 16 cities of that appellation, besides the one to which I more particularly allude. But ours is that which went by the name of Antiochia Epidaphne, from its vicinity to the little village of Daphne, where stood a temple to that divinity. It was built, although about this matter there is some dispute, by Seleucus Nicanor, the first king of the country after Alexander the Great, in memory of his father Antiochus, and became immediately the residence of the Syrian monarchy. In the flourishing times of the Roman Empire, it was the ordinary station of the prefect of the eastern provinces, and many of the emperors of the Queen City, among whom may be mentioned especially Verus and Valens, spent here the greater part of their time. But I perceive we have arrived at the city itself. Let us ascend this battlement and throw our eyes upon the town and neighbouring country. What broad and rapid river is that which forces its way with innumerable falls through the mountainous wilderness and finally through the wilderness of buildings? That is Orontes, and it is the only water in sight, with the exception of the Mediterranean, which stretches like a broad mirror about 12 miles off to the southward Everyone has seen the Mediterranean, but let me tell you, there are few who have had a peep at Antioch. By few, I mean a few who, like you and me, have had, at the same time, the advantages of a modern education. Therefore, cease to regard that sea, and give your whole attention to the mass of houses that lie beneath us. You will remember that it is now the year of the world 3830. Were it later, for example, were it the year of our Lord 1845, we should be deprived of this extraordinary spectacle. In the 19th century, Antioch is, that is to say, Antioch will be, in a lamentable state of decay. It will have been, by that time, totally destroyed at 3 different periods by 3 successive earthquakes. Indeed, to say the truth, what little of its former self may then remain will be found in so desolate and ruinous state that the patriarch shall have removed his residence to Damascus. This is well. I see you profit by my advice, and are making the most of your time in inspecting the premises, in satisfying your eyes with the memorials and the things of fame that most surround this city. I beg pardon. I had forgotten that Shakespeare will not flourish for 1750 years to come. But does not the appearance of Epidaphne justify me in calling it grotesque? It is well fortified, and in this respect is as much indebted to nature as to art. Very true. There are a prodigious number of stately palaces. There are. And the numerous temples, sumptuous and magnificent, may bear comparison with the most lauded of antiquity. All this I must acknowledge. Still, there is an infinity of mud huts and abominable hovels. We cannot help perceiving abundance of filth in every kennel, and were it not for the overpowering fumes of idolatrous incense, I have no doubt we should find a most intolerable stench. Did you ever behold streets so insufferably narrow, or houses so miraculously tall? What a gloom their shadows cast upon the ground! It is well the swinging lamps in those endless colonnades are kept burning throughout the day. We should otherwise have the darkness of Egypt in the time of her desolation. It is certainly a strange place. What is the meaning of yonder singular building? See, it towers above all the others, and lies to the eastward of what I take to be the royal palace. That is the new temple of the sun, who was adored in Syria under the title of Elagabala. Hereafter, a very notorious Roman emperor will institute this worship in Rome, and thence derive a cognomen, Heliogabalus. I dare say you would take to a peep at the divinity of the temple. You need not look You need not look up at the heavens. His sonship is not there. At least not the sonship adored by the Syrians. That deity will be found in the interior of yonder building. He is worshipped under the figure of a large stone pillar terminating at the summit in a cone or pyramid, whereby is denoted fire. Hark! Behold! Who can these ridiculous beings be, half naked with their faces painted, shouting and gesticulating to the rabble? Some few are mountebanks. Others more particularly belong to the race of philosophers. The greatest portion, however, those especially who belabour the populace with clubs, are the principal courtiers of the palace, executing, as in duty bound, some laudable comicality of the king's. But what have we here? Heavens, the town is swarming with wild beasts. How terrible a spectacle! How dangerous a peculiarity! Terrible, if you please, but not in the least degree dangerous. Each animal, if you will take the pains to observe, is following, very quietly, in the wake of its master. Some few, to be sure, are led with a rope round about the neck, but these are chiefly the lesser or timid species. The lion, the tiger, and the leopard are entirely without restraint. They have been trained without difficulty to their present profession, and attend upon their respective owners in the capacity of valet de chambre. It is true, there are occasions when nature asserts her violated dominion, but then the devouring of a man-at-arms, or the throttling of a consecrated bull, is a circumstance of too little moment to be more than hinted at in Epidaphne. But what extraordinary tumult do I hear? Surely this is a loud noise even for Antioch. It argues some commotion of unusual interest. Yes, undoubtedly, the king has ordered some novel spectacle, some gladiatorial exhibition at the Hippodrome, or perhaps the massacre of the Symphian prisoners, or the conflagration of his new palace, or the tearing down of a Hamson temple, or indeed a bonfire of a few Jews. The uproar increases. Shouts of laughter ascend the skies. The air becomes dissonant with wind instruments, and horrible with the clamour of a million throats. Let us descend, for the love of fun, and see what is going on. This way, be careful. Here we are in the principal street, which is called the Street of Timarchus. The sea of people is coming this way, and we shall find a difficulty in stemming the tide. They are pouring through the alley of Heraclides, which leads directly from the palace. Therefore the king is most probably among the rioters. Yes, I hear the shouts of the herald proclaiming his approach in the pompous phraseology of the East. We shall have a glimpse of his person as he passes by the temple of Ashimar. Let us ensconce ourselves in the vestibule of the sanctuary. He will be here anon. In the meantime, let us survey this image. What is it? Oh, it is the god Ashimar in proper person. You perceive, however, that he is neither a lamb, nor a goat, nor a satyr. Neither has he much resemblance to the Pan of the Arcadians. Yet all these appearances have been given, I beg pardon, will be given, by the learned of future ages, to the Ashimar of the Syrians. Put on your spectacles and tell me what it is. What is it? Here, I'm going to take a quick drink. Must moisten my palate. Bless me, it is an ape. True, a baboon, but by no means the less a deity. His name is a derivation of the Greek simia. What great fools are antiquarians! But see, yonder scampers a ragged little urchin. Where is he going? What is he bawling about? What does he say? Oh, he says the king is coming in triumph, that he is dressed in state, that he has just finished putting to death with his own hand 1,000 chained Israelitish prisoners. For this exploit, the ragamuffin is lauding him to the skies. Hark! Here comes a troop of similar description. They have made a Latin hymn upon the valour of the king, and are singing it as they go. Now you're going to have to excuse my bad Latin. Milli, 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 milli. Decolavimus unus homo. Milli, 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 milli. Decolavimus. Milli, milli, milli. Vivat que milli, milli occidit. Tantum vini habet nemo. Quantum sanguinis effudit. Which may be thus paraphrased. 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. We with one warrior have slain. 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. 1,000 sing 1,000 over again. So ho, let us sing, long life to our king, who knocked over 1,000 so fine. So ho, let us roar, he has given us more, red gallons of gore, than all Syria can furnish of wine. Do you hear that flourish of trumpets? Yes, the king is coming. See, the people are aghast with admiration, and lift up their eyes to the heavens in reverence. He comes, he is coming, there he is. Who? Where? The king? I do not behold him. Cannot say that I perceive him. Then you must be blind. Very possible. Still I see nothing but a tumultuous mob of idiots and madmen, who are busy in prostrating themselves before a gigantic camel leopard, and endeavouring to obtain a kiss of the animal's hooves. See, the beast has very justly kicked one of the rabble over, and another, and another, and another. Indeed, I cannot help admiring the animal for the excellent use he is making of his feet. Rabble, indeed! Why, these are the noble and free citizens of Epidaphne. Beast, did you say? Take care that you are not overheard. Do you not perceive that the animal has the visage of a man? Why, my dear sir, that camel leopard is no other than Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus the illustrious, king of Syria, and the most potent of all of the autocrats of the East. It is true that he is entitled, at times, Antiochus Epimanes, Antiochus the madman, but that is because all people have not the capacity to appreciate his merits. It is also certain that he is at present ensconced in the hide of a beast, and is doing his best to play the part of a camel leopard. But this is done for the better sustaining his dignity as king. Besides, the monarch is of gigantic stature, and the dress is therefore neither unbecoming nor overlarge. We may, however, presume he would not have adopted it but for some occasion of a special state. Such, you will allow, is the massacre of 1,000 Jews. With how superior a dignity the monarch perambulates on all fours. His tail, you perceive, is held aloft by his two principal concubines, Helene and Argeles, and his whole appearance would be infinitely prepossessing were it not for the protuberance of his eyes, which will certainly start out of his head, and the queer colour of his face, which has become nondescript from the quantity of wine he has swallowed. Let us follow him to the hippodrome, whither he is proceeding, and listen to the song of triumph which he is commencing. Who is king but Epiphanes? Who? Say who, do you know? Who is king but Epiphanes? Bravo, bravo. There is none but Epiphanes. No, there is none. So tear down the temples and put out the sun. Well and strenuously sung, the populace are hailing him Prince of Poets, as well as Glory of the East, Delight of the Universe, and most remarkable of camel leopards. They have encored his effusion, and do you hear? He is singing it over again. When he arrives at the hippodrome, he will be crowned with the poetic wreath in anticipation of his victory at the approaching Olympics. But good Jupiter, what is the matter in the crowd behind us? Behind us, did you say? I perceive. My friend, it is well that you spoke in time. Let us get into a place of safety soon as possible. Here, let us conceal ourselves in this arch of this aqueduct, and I will inform you presently of the origin of the commotion. It has turned out as I have been anticipating. The singular appearance of the camel leopard with the head of a man has, it seems, given offence to the notions of propriety entertained in general by the wild animals domesticated in the city. A mutiny has been the result, and as is usual upon such occasions, all human efforts will be of no avail in quelling the mob. Several of the Syrians have already been devoured, but the general voice of the four-footed patriots seems to be for eating up the camel leopard. The Prince of Poets, therefore, is upon his hinder legs, running for his life. His courtiers have left him in the lurch, and his concubines have followed so excellent an example. Delight of the universe, thou art in a sad predicament. Glory of the East, thou art in danger of mastication. Therefore, never regard so piteously thy tail. It will undoubtedly be dragged in the mud, and for this there is no help. Look not behind thee, then, at its unavoidable degradation, but take courage, ply thy legs with vigour, and scud for the hippodrome. Remember that thou art Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus the illustrious, also Prince of Poets, Glory of the East, Delight of the Universe, and most remarkable of camel leopards. Heavens, what a power of speed thou art displaying! What a capacity for leg bail thou art developing! Run, Prince! Bravo! Epiphanes, well done! Camel-leopard, glorious! Antiochus, he runs! He leaps! He flies! Like an arrow from a catapult he approaches the hippodrome. He leaps, he shrieks, he is there. This is well, for hadst thou, glory of the East, been half a second longer in reaching the gates of the amphitheatre, there is not a bear's cub in Epidaphne that would not have had a nibble at thy carcass. Let us be off, let us take our departure, for we shall find our delicate modern ears unable to endure the vast uproar which is about to commence in celebration of the king's escape. Listen, it has already commenced. See, the whole town is topsy-turvy. Surely this is the most populous city of the East. What a wilderness of people, what a jumble of all ranks and ages. What a multiplicity of sects and nations, what a variety of costumes, what a babble of languages, what a screaming of beasts, what a tinkling of instruments, what a parcel of philosophers. Come, let us be off. Stay a moment. I see a vast hubbub in the hippodrome. What is the meaning of it? I beseech you. That? Oh, nothing. The noble and free citizens of Epidaphne being, as they declare, well satisfied of the faith, valour, wisdom, and divinity of their king, and having, moreover, been eye-witness of his late superhuman agility, do think it no more than their duty to invest his brows, in addition to the poetic crown, with the wreath of victory in the foot race, a wreath which it is evident he must obtain at the celebration of the next Olympiad, and which, therefore, they now give him in advance. And that is the end of that tale, which is a little odd. I'm not going to lie. I think I misunderstood the beginning of that one. There were speech marks in there. It seems that the narrator and yourself are travelling back in time to this place, and the questions being asked are you, the reader, asking it of the narrator. But yeah, that's an odd little story. I'm not quite sure why Nicole put that one in there. But it's Poe. They're all odd. They're the very definition of odd. I'm going to wet my palate some more. Ah, Nicole likes it. Surprise. Ah. So where's my camera move? Let's see if it snaps. No, it's fine. So now we return to the poems. What poem shall we read? Let's have a little quickie. Sausage likes it. I'm glad you do. Let me find out what works for you too. Poems. There we go. If anyone has a request, by the way, feel free to... I'm not saying I'm going to read it, but pop it in chat. You never know. I'm certainly not reading The Bells, because that is not a poem. That is Poe writing the... Literally, there are whole verses that are the bells, the bells, the bells. The bells, the bells, bells, bells. Bells, bells, bells. Bells, bells, bells. And not knowing the cadence in which he wants that to be spoken or sung, it is literally just the bells being repeated 20 or 30 times. So that one's off the list. Let's see. Yes, I think we're going to do a dream within a dream for now. 801. 801. Prolific writing. Because I'll show you in a minute once I found the page. There we go. This is not large print. And we have over 1,000 pages. Horrendous. Nicole's happy with all stories and poems. I mean, of course, you are the Poe nut. But yes, a dream within a dream. Let's see if I get this one without making any mistakes. Take this kiss upon the brow, and, in parting from you now, thus much let me avow, you are not wrong, who deem that my days have been a dream. Yet if hope has flown away, in a night or in a day, in a vision or in none, is it therefore the less gone? All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. I stand amid the roar of a surf-tormented shore, and I hold within my hand grains of the golden sand. How few, yet how they creep through my fingers to the deep, while I weep, while I weep. O God, can I not grasp them with a tighter clasp? O God, can I not save one from the pitiless wave? Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream? Nailed it. I like that one. Nice, short, simple, no stupid long words. And much meaning in that one. You know, it's all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream. Are we dreaming? Are we in someone else's dream? You must question your very reality. Although all I can say is if I'm someone else's dream, if I'm living a dream, or in a dream, the person or creature that is dreaming is out of its mind. Like, I am a figment of someone's imagination. How the hell did you come up with me? Okay. So, let's go back to the stories. Red Bull and trauma. Wow. Red Bull and trauma is what comes up with me. That's harsh. Okay. What should we go for now? Never bet the devil, the Sphinx, premature burial, 3 Sundays. I'm going to go for the first one I find in the index, to be honest. Premature burial, there we go. 219. Quite early in the book. Is it good? Prolific? Well known? We shall find out. So yes, word of warning to those. We are obviously reading Edgar Allan Poe, and with the title being The Premature Burial, I imagine it may involve being buried alive. So, you know, content warning. Catalepsy warning. Even better. I wish I had catalepsy sometimes, just sleep the world away. As long as I'm not suffering a night terror or a nightmare at the time. But yes, the premature burial. There are certain themes of which the interest is all-absorbing, but which are too entirely horrible for the purposes of legitimate fiction. These the mere romanticist must eschew if he does not wish to offend or to disgust. They are, with propriety, handled only when the severity and majesty of truth sanctify and sustain them. We thrill, for example, with the most intense of pleasurable pain over the accounts of the passage of the Beresina, of the earthquake at Lisbon, of the plague at London, of the massacre of St. Bartholomew, or of the stifling of the 123 prisoners in the Black Hole at Calcutta. But in these accounts, it is the fact, it is the reality, it is the history which excites. As inventions, we should regard them with simple abhorrence. I have mentioned some few of the more prominent and august calamities on record. But in these, it is the extent, not less than the character of the calamity, which so vividly impresses the fancy. I need to remind the reader that from the long and weird catalogue of human miseries, I might have selected many individual instances more replete with essential suffering than any of these vast generalities of disaster. The true wretchedness, indeed the ultimate woe, is particular, not diffuse. That the ghastly extremes of agony are endured by man, the unit, and never by man, the mass. For this, let us thank a merciful God. To be buried while alive is beyond question the most terrific of these extremes which has ever fallen to the lot of mere mortality. That it has frequently, very frequently, so fallen will scarcely be denied by those who think. The boundaries which divide life from death are at best shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and where the other begins? We know that there are diseases in which occur total cessations of all the apparent functions of vitality, and yet in which these cessations are merely suspensions, properly so called. There are only temporary pauses in the incomprehensible mechanism. A certain period elapses, and some unseen, mysterious principle again sets in motion the magic pinions and the wizard wheels. The silver cord was not forever loosed, nor the golden bowl irreparably broken. But where, meantime, was the soul? Apart, however, from the inevitable conclusion, a priori that causes must produce such effects, that the well-known occurrence of such cases of suspended animation must naturally give rise, now and then, to premature interments. Apart from this consideration, we have the direct testimony of medical and ordinary experience to prove that a vast number of such interments have actually taken place. I might refer at once, if necessary, to 100 well authenticated instances, one of the very more remarkable character, and of which the circumstances may be fresh in the memory of some of my readers, occurred not very long ago in the neighbouring city of Baltimore, where it occasioned a painful, intense, and wildly extended excitement. The wife of one of the most respectable citizens, a lawyer of eminence and a member of Congress, was seized with a sudden and unaccountable illness, which completely baffled the skill of her physicians. After much suffering, she died, or supposed to die. No one suspected, indeed, or had reason to suspect, that she was actually not dead. She presented all the ordinary appearances of death. The face assumed the usual pinched and sunken outline, the lips were of the usual marble pallor. The eyes were lustreless. There was no warmth. Pulsation had ceased. For 3 days the body was preserved unburied, during which it had required a stony rigidity. The funeral, in short, was hastened on account of the rapid advance of what was supposed to be decomposition. The lady was deposited in her family vault, which for 3 subsequent years was undisturbed. At the expiration of this term it was opened for the reception of a sarcophagus. But alas, how fearful a shock awaited the husband, who personally threw open the door. As its portal swung outwardly back, some white apparelled object fell rattling within his arms. It was the skeleton of his wife in her yet unmoulded shroud. A careful investigation rendered it evident that she had revived within 2 days after her entombment, that her struggles within the coffin had caused it to fall from a ledge or shelf to the floor, where it was so broken as to permit her escape. A lamp which had been accidentally left full of oil within the tombs was found empty. It might have been exhausted, however, by evaporation. On the uppermost of the steps which led down into the dread chamber was a large fragment of the coffin, with which it seemed that she had endeavoured to arrest attention by striking the iron door. While thus occupied, she probably swooned, or possibly died, through sheer terror, and in falling, her shroud became entangled in some ironwork, which projected interiorly. Thus she remained, and thus she rotted, erect. In the year 1810, a case of living inhumation happened in France, attended with circumstances which go far to warrant the assertion that truth is, indeed, stranger than fiction. The heroine of the story was Mademoiselle Victorine Lafourcade, a young girl of illustrious family, of wealth, and of great personal beauty. Among her numerous suitors was Julien Busseau, a poor literature or journalist of Paris. His talents and general amiability had recommended him to the notice of the heiress, by whom he seems to have been truly beloved. But her pride of birth decided her, finally, to reject him, and to wed a Monsieur René, a banker and diplomatist of some eminence. After marriage, however, this gentleman neglected, and perhaps even more positively ill-treated her. Having passed with him some wretched years, she died. At least her condition so closely resembled death as to deceive everyone who saw her. She was buried, not in a vault, but in an ordinary grave in the village of her nativity. Filled with despair and still inflamed by the memory of a profound attachment, the lover journeys from the capital to the remote province in which the village lies, with the romantic purpose of disinterring the corpse and possessing himself of its luxuriant tresses. He reaches the grave at midnight. He unearths the coffin, opens it, and is in the act of detaching the hair when he is arrested by the unclosing of the beloved eyes. In fact, the lady had been buried alive. Vitality had not altogether departed, and she was aroused by the caresses of her lover from the lethargy which had been mistaken for death. He bore her frantically to his lodgings in the village. He employed certain powerful restoratives suggested by no little medical learning. In fine, she revived. She recognized her preserver. She remained with him until, by slow degrees, she fully recovered her original health. Her woman's heart was not adamant, and this last lesson of love sufficed to soften it. She bestowed it upon Busseau. She returned no more to her husband, but, concealing from him her resurrection, fled with her lover to America. 20 years afterward, the two returned to France, in the persuasion that time had so greatly altered the lady's appearance that her friends would be unable to recognize her. They were mistaken, however, for, at the first meeting, Monsieur René did actually recognize and make claim to his wife. This claim she resisted, and a judicial tribunal sustained her in her resistance, deciding that the peculiar circumstances with the long lapse of years had extinguished not only equably but legally the authority of the husband. The Surgical Journal of Leipzig, a periodical of high authority and merit, which some American bookseller would do well to translate and republish, records in their late number a very distressing event of the characters in question. An officer of artillery, a man of gigantic stature and of robust health, being thrown from an unmanageable horse, received a very severe contusion upon the head, which rendered him insensible at once. The skull was slightly fractured, but no immediate danger was apprehended. Trepanning was accomplished successfully. He was bled, and many other of the ordinary means of relief were adopted. Gradually, however, he fell into a more and more hopeless state of stupor, and finally it was thought that he died. The weather was warm, and he was buried with indecent haste in one of the public cemeteries. His funeral took place on Thursday. On the Sunday following, the grounds of the cemetery were, as usual, much thronged with visitors, and about noon an intense excitement was created by the declaration of a peasant that, while sitting upon the grave of the officer, he had distinctly felt a commotion of the earth, as if occasioned by someone struggling beneath. At first, little attention was paid to the man's asseveration, but his evident terror and the dogged obstinacy which he persisted in his story had at length their natural effect upon the crowd. Spades were hurriedly procured, and the grave, which was shamefully shallow, was in a few moments so far thrown open that the head of its occupant appeared. He was then seemingly dead, but he sat nearly erect within his coffin, the lid of which, in his furious struggles, he had partially uplifted. He was forthwith conveyed to the nearest hospital, and there pronounced to be still living, although in an asphytic condition. After some hours, he revived, recognised individuals of his acquaintance, and in broken sentences spoke of his agonies in the grave. From what he related, it was clear that he must have been conscious of life for more than an hour while inhumed before lapsing into insensibility. The grave was carelessly and loosely filled with an exceedingly porous soil, and thus some air was necessarily admitted. He heard the footsteps of the crowd overhead, and endeavoured to make himself heard in turn. It was the tumult within the grounds of the cemetery, he said, which appeared to awake him from a deep sleep. But no sooner was he awake than he became fully aware of the awful horrors of his position. This patient, it is recorded, was doing well, and seemed to be in a fair way of ultimate recovery, but fell a victim to the quackeries of medical experiment. The galvanic battery was applied, and he suddenly expired in one of those ecstatic paroxysms which occasionally it superinduces. The mention of the galvanic battery nevertheless recalls to my memory a well-known and very extraordinary case in point, where its action proved the means of restoring to animation a young attorney of London, who had been interred for 2 days. This occurred in 1831, and created at the time a very profound sensation wherever it was made the subject of converse. The patient, Mr. Edward Stapleton, had died apparently of typhus fever, accompanied with some anomalous symptoms which had excited the curiosity of his medical attendants. Upon his seeming decease, his friends were requested to sanction a post-mortem examination, but declined to permit it. As often happens when such refusals are made, the practitioners resolved to disinter the body and dissect it at leisure in private. Arrangements were easily effected with some of the numerous corpses of body snatchers with which London abounds, and upon the third night after the funeral, the supposed corpse was unearthed from a grave 8 feet deep, and deposited in the operating chamber of one of the private hospitals. An incision of some extent had actually been made in the abdomen, when the fresh and undecayed appearance of the subject suggested an application of the battery. One experiment succeeded another, and the customary efforts supervened, with nothing to characterize them in any respect except, upon 1 or 2 occasions, a more than ordinary degree of lifelikeness in the convulsion action. It grew late, the day was about to dawn, and it was thought expedient at length to proceed at once to the dissection. A student, however, was especially desirous of testing a theory of his own, and insisted upon applying the battery to one of the pectoral muscles. A rough gash was made, and a wire hastily brought in contact, when the patient, with a hurried but quite unconvulsive movement, arose from the table, stepped onto the middle of the floor, gazed about him uneasily for a few seconds, and then spoke. What he said was unintelligible, but words were uttered. The syllabification was distinct. Having spoken, he fell heavily to the floor. For some moments, all were paralysed with awe, but the urgency of the case soon restored them to the presence of mind. It was seen that Mr. Stapleton was alive, although in a swoon. Upon exhibition of the ether, he revived, and was rapidly restored to health and to the society of his friends, from whom, however, all knowledge of his resuscitation was withheld, until relapse was no longer to be apprehended. Their wonder, their rapturous astonishment, may be conceived. I thought these were supposed to be short, Nicole. I mean, for Poe, they are positively minute, but... The most thrilling peculiarity of this incident, nevertheless, is involved in what Mr. S. himself asserts. He declares that at no period was he altogether insensible, that dully and confusedly he was aware of everything which happened to him, from the moment in which he was pronounced dead by his physicians to that in which he fell swooning to the floor of the hospital. I am alive were the uncomprehended words which, upon recognising the locality of the dissecting room, he had endeavoured in his extremity to utter. It were an easy matter to multiply such histories as these, but I forbear, for indeed we have no need of such to establish the fact that premature interments occur. When we reflect how very rarely, from the nature of the case, we have it in our power to detect them, we must admit that they may frequently occur without our cognizance. Scarcely in truth is a graveyard ever encroached upon, for any purpose, to any great extent, that skeletons are not found in postures which suggest the most fearful of suspicions. Fearful indeed the suspicion, but more fearful the doom. It may be asserted, without hesitation, that no event is so terribly well adapted to inspire the supremeness of bodily and of mental distress as his burial before death. The unendurable oppression of the lungs, the stifling fumes of the damp earth, the clinging to the death garments, the rigid embrace of the narrow house, the blackness of the absolute night, the silence like a sea that overwhelms, the unseen but palpable presence of the conqueror worm. These things, with the thoughts of the air and grass above, with memory of dear friends who would fly to save us if but informed of our fate, and with consciousness that of this fate they can never be informed, that a hopeless portion is that of the really dead. These considerations, I say, carry into the heart, which still palpitates, a degree of appalling and intolerable horror, from which the most daring imagination must recoil. We know of nothing so agonizing upon earth. We can dream of nothing half so hideous in the realms of the nethermost hell, and thus all narratives upon his topic have an interest profound, an interest nevertheless, which through the sacred awe of the topic itself very properly and very peculiarly depends upon our conviction of the truth of the matter narrated. What I have now to tell is of my own actual knowledge, of my own positive and personal experience. We just went through like 4 pages of like recounting other people, and now we're getting to his personal experience. This would have been enough. Yes, I know. Poe waffles. I must be him reincarnated. Only I know what a comma and a full stop are. For several years I have been subject to the attacks of a singular disorder which physicians have agreed to term catalepsy, in default of a more definitive title. Although both the immediate and the predisposing causes, and even the actual diagnosis of this disease are still mysterious, its obvious and apparent character is sufficiently well understood. Its variations seem to be chiefly of degree. Sometimes the patient lies, for a day only, or even for a shorter period, in a species of exaggerated lethargy. He is senseless and externally motionless, but the pulsation of the heart is still faintly perceptible. Some traces of warmth remain, a slight colour lingers within the centre of cheek, and upon application of a mirror to the lips we can detect the torpid, unequal, and the vacillating action of the lungs. Then again the duration of the trance is for weeks, even for months, while the closest scrutiny and most rigorous medical tests fail to establish any material distinction between the state of the sufferer and what we conceive of absolute death. Very usually he is saved from premature interment solely by the knowledge of his friends that he has been previously subject to catalepsy, by the consequent suspicion excited, and above all, by the non-appearance of decay. The advances of the malady are, luckily, gradual. The first manifestations, although marked and unequivocal, the fits grow successively more and more distinctive, and endure each for a longer term than the preceding. In this lies the principal security from inhumation. The unfortunate whose first attack should be of the extreme character, which is occasionally seen, would almost inevitably be consigned alive to the tomb. My own case differed in no important particular from those mentioned in medical books. Sometimes without any apparent cause I sank, little by little, into a condition of semi-syncope, or half-swoon, and in this condition, without pain, without ability to stir, or strictly speaking, to think, but with a dull lethargic consciousness of life and of the presence of those who rounded my bed, I remained, until the crisis of the disease restored me, suddenly, to perfect sensation. At other times I was quickly and impetuously smitten. I grew sick and numb and chilly and dizzy, and so fell prostrate at once. Then for weeks all was void and black and silent, and nothing became the universe. Total annihilation could be no more. From these later attacks I awoke, however, with a gradation slow in proportion to the suddenness of the seizure. Just as the day dawns to the friendless and houseless beggar who roams the streets throughout the long desolate winter night, just so tardily, just so wearily, just so cheerily came back the light of the soul to me. Apart from the tendency to trance, however, my general health appeared to be good, nor could I perceive that it was all affected by the one prevalent malady, unless, indeed, an idiosyncrasy in my ordinary sleep may be looked upon as superinduced. Upon awaking from slumber, I can never gain, at once, thorough possession of my senses, and always remained, for many minutes, in much bewilderment and perplexity. The mental faculties in general, but the memory in especial, being in a condition of absolute abeyance. In all that I endured there was no physical suffering, but of moral distress and infinitude. My fancy grew carnal. I talked of worms, of tombs, and epitaphs. I was lost in reveries of death, and the idea of premature burial held continually possession of my brain. The ghastly danger to which I was subjected haunted me day and night. In the former, the torture of meditation was excessive, in the latter, supreme. When the grim darkness overspread the earth, then, with every horror of thought, I shook as the quivering plumes upon the hearse. When nature could endure wakefulness no longer, it was with a struggle that I consented to sleep. For I shuddered to reflect that upon awaking, I might found myself the tenant of a grave. And when finally I sank into slumber, it was only to rush at once into a world of phantasms, above which, with vast sable overshadowing wings, hovered, predominant, the one sepulchral idea. From the innumerable images of gloom which thus oppress me in dreams, I select for record but a solitary vision. Methought I was immersed in a cataleptic trance of more than usual duration and profundity. Suddenly there came an icy hand upon my forehead, and an impatient gibbering voice whispered the word, "Arise," within my ear. I sat erect. The darkness was total. I could not see the figure of him who had aroused me. I could call to my mind neither the period at which I had fallen into the trance, nor the locality in which I then lay. While I remained motionless and busied in endeavours to collect my thoughts, the hold hand grasped me fiercely by the wrist, shaking it petulantly, while the gibbering voice said again, "Arise, did I not bid thee arise?" "And who," I demanded, "art thou?" I have no name in the regions which I inhabit, replied the voice mournfully. I was mortal, but am fiend. I was merciless, but am pitiful. Thou dost feel that I shudder. My teeth chatter as I speak. Yet it is not with the chilliness of the night without end. But this hideousness is insufferable. How canst thou tranquilly sleep? I cannot rest for the cry of these great agonies. These sights are more than I can bear. Get thee up, come with me into the outer night, and let me unfold thee the graves. Is not this a spectacle of woe? Behold. I looked, and the unseen figure, which still grasped me by the wrist, had caused to be thrown open the graves of all mankind, and from each issued the faint phosphoric radiance of decay, so that I could see into the innermost recesses, and there view the shrouded bodies in their sad and solemn slumbers with the worm. But alas, the real sleepers were fewer, by many millions, than those who slumbered not at all, and there was a feeble struggling, and there was a general and sad unrest, and from out the depths of the countless pits there came a melancholy rustling from the garments of the buried, and of those who seemed tranquilly to repose. I saw that a vast number had changed, in a greater or less degree, the rigid and uneasy position in which they had originally been entombed, and the voice again said to me as I gazed, Is it not a pitiful sight? But before I could find the words to reply, the figure had ceased to grasp my wrist. The phosphoric lights had expired, and the graves were closed with a sudden violence, while from out them arose a tumult of despairing cries, saying again, Is it not, O God, is it not a very pitiful sight? Fantasies such as these, presenting themselves at night, extended their terrific influence far into my waking hours. My nerves became thoroughly unstrung, and I fell a prey to perpetual horror. I hesitated to ride, or to walk, or to indulge in any exercise that would carry me from my home. In fact, I no longer dared trust myself out of the immediate presence of those who were aware of my proneness to catalepsy, lest, falling into one of my usual fits, I should be buried before my real condition could be ascertained. I doubted the fidelity of my dearest friends. I dreaded that in some trance of more than customary duration, they might be prevailed upon to regard me as irrecoverable. I even went so far as to fear that, as I occasioned much trouble, they might be glad to consider any very protracted attack a sufficient excuse for getting rid of me altogether. It was in vain they endeavoured to reassure me by the most solemn promises. I exacted the most sacred oaths that under no circumstances they would bury me until decomposition had so materially advanced as to render further preservation impossible. And even then, my mortal terrors would listen to no reason, would accept no consolation. I entered into a series of elaborate precautions. Among other things, I had the family vault so remodelled as to admit of being readily opened from within. The slightest pressure upon a long lever that extended far into the tomb would cause the iron portals to fly back. There are arrangements also for the free admission of air and light, and convenient receptacles for food and water within immediate reach of the coffin intended for my reception. This coffin was warmly and softly padded, and was provided with a lid fashioned upon the principle of the vault door, with the addition of springs so contrived that the feeblest movement of the body would be sufficient to set it at liberty. Besides all this, there was suspended from the roof of the tomb a large bell, the rope of which, it was designed, should extend through a hole in the coffin, and so be fastened to one of the hands of the corpse. But alas, what avails the vigilance against the destiny of man? Not even these well-contrived securities suffice to save from the uttermost agonies of living inhumation a wretch to these agonies foredoomed. There arrived an epoch as often before, there had arrived, in which I found myself emerging from total unconsciousness into the first feeble and indefinite sense of existence. Slowly, with a tortoise gradation, approached the faint grey dawn of the cycle day, a torpid uneasiness and a pathetic endurance of dull pain. No care, no hope, no effort. Then, after a long interval, a ringing in the ears. Then, after a lapse still longer, a prickling or tingling sensation in the extremities. Then a seemingly eternal period of pleasurable quiescence, during which the awakening feelings are struggling into thought. Then a brief resinking into non-entity. Then a sudden recovery. At length, the slight quivering of an eyelid, immediate thereupon an electric shock of terror, deadly and indefinite, which sends the blood in torrents from the temples to the heart. And now the first positive effort to think, and now the first endeavour to remember, and now a partial and evanescent success. And now the memory has so far regained in its dominion that in some measure I am cognizant of my state. I feel that I am not awaking from ordinary sleep. I recollect that I have been subject to catalepsy, and now at least, as if by the rush of an ocean, my shuddering spirit is overwhelmed by the one grim danger, by the one spectral and ever prevalent idea. For some minutes after this fancy possessed me, I remained without motion. And why? I could not summon the courage to move. I dare not make the effort which was satisfy me of my fate, and yet there was something at my heart which whispered me it was sure. Despair, such as no other species of wretchedness ever calls into being, despair alone urged me, after long irresolution, to uplift the heavy lids of my eyes. I uplifted them. It was dark, all dark. I knew that the fit was over. I knew that the crisis of my disorder had long passed. I knew that I now fully recovered the use of my visual faculties, and yet it was dark, all dark. The intense and utter raylessness of the night that endureth forevermore. I endeavoured to shriek, and my lips and my parched tongue moved convulsively together in an attempt, but no voice issued from the cavernous lungs which, oppressed as if by weight of some incumbent mountain, gasped and palpitated with the heart at every elaborate and struggling inspiration. The movement of the jaws in this effort to cry aloud showed me that they were bound up, as is usual with the dead. I felt too that I lay upon some hard substance, and by something similar my sides were also closely compressed. So far I had not ventured to stir any of my limbs, but I now violently threw up my arms, which had been lying at length with the wrists crossed. They struck a solid wooden substance, which extended above my person at an elevation not more than 6 inches from my face. I could no longer doubt that I reposed within a coffin at last. And now, amid all my infinite miseries, came sweetly the cherub hope, for I thought of my precautions. I writhed and made spasmodic exertions to force open the lid. It would not move. I felt my wrists for the bell rope. It was not to be found. And now the comforter fled for ever, and a still sterner despair reigned triumphant. For I could not help perceiving the absence of the paddings which I had so carefully prepared, and then too there came suddenly to my nostrils a strong peculiar odour of moist earth. The conclusion was irresistible. I was not within the vault. I had fallen into a trance while absent from home, while among strangers. When or how I could not remember, and it was they who had buried me as a dog, nailed up in some common coffin and thrust deep, deep and forever into some ordinary and nameless grave. At this awful conviction forced itself thus into the inmost chambers of my soul, I once again struggled to cry aloud, and in this second endeavour I succeeded. A long, wild and continuous shriek or yell of agony resounded through the realms of the subterranean night. "Hello, hello there," said a gruff voice in reply. What the devil's the matter now? Said a second. Get out of that, said a third. What do you mean by yowling in that air kind of style, like a catty mount? Said a fourth. And hereupon I was seized and shaken without ceremony for several minutes by a junto of very rough-looking individuals. They did not arouse me from my slumber, for I was wide awake when I screamed. They restored to me the full possession of my memory. This adventure occurred near Richmond in Virginia. Accompanied by a friend, I had proceeded upon a gunning expedition some miles down the banks of the James River. Night approached, and we were overtaken by a storm. The cabin of a small sloop lying at anchor in the stream, and laden with garden mould, afforded us the only available shelter. We made the best of it, and passed the night on board. I slept in one of the only 2 berths in the vessel, and the berths of the sloop, of 60 or 70 tons, need scarcely be described. That which occupied had no bedding of any kind. Its extreme width was 18 inches. The distance of its bottom from the deck overhead was precisely the same. I found it a matter of exceedingly difficulty to squeeze myself in. Nevertheless, I slept soundly, and the whole of my vision, for it was no dream and no nightmare, arose naturally from the circumstances of my position, from my ordinary bias of thought, and from the difficulty to which I have alluded of collecting my senses, and especially of regaining my memory. For a long time after waking from slumber, the men who shook me were the crew of the sloop, and some labourers engaged to unload it. From the load itself came the earthy smell. The bandage about the jaws was a silk handkerchief in which I had bound up my head in default of my customary nightcap. The tortures endured, however, were indubitably quite equal for the time to those of actual sepulture. They were very inconceivably hideous, but out of evil proceeded good. For their very excess wrought in my spirit inevitable revulsion. My soul acquired tone, acquired temper. I went abroad. I took vigorous exercise. I breathed the free air of heaven. I thought upon other subjects than death. I discarded my medical books. Buchan I burned. I read no night thoughts, no fustian about churchyards, no boogaboo tales such as this. In short, I became a new man, and lived a man's life. From that memorable night, I dismissed forever my carnal apprehensions, and with them vanished a cataleptic disorder, of which perhaps they had been less the consequence than the cause. There are moments when, even to the sober eye of reason, the world of our sad humanity may assume the semblance of a hell. But the imagination of a man is no carapace to explore with impunity to its every cavern. Alas, the grim legion of sepulchral terrors cannot be regarded as altogether fanciful, but, like the demons in whose company Afrasabib made his voyage down the Oxus, they must sleep, or they will devour us. They must be suffered to slumber, or we perish. Holy hell. You swear these are short stories? How's that only been an hour and a half? Has it been that? Yeah, it's been an hour and a half and we went into 2 stories. Oh, God. Oh. Wow, instantly. Wow. Nicole is on fire. Sorry, not like Moon. I have no idea what you said. Guessing it wasn't something she liked. Should be careful. My mods are, bad hammer happy. And you are very welcome, Sausage. You get yourself nice and comfy. And you sleep. And hopefully you have good dreams. And not the nightmares that I'm probably going to have after reading this. However, it is 10:30 at night. So we're going to go for maybe another half hour, an hour. So hopefully these suggestions are actually shorter than that. Well, don't dream of being buried alive. Because you know it's not going to happen. The Oval Portrait of Morella. I did see, yeah. They should be in here. This is called the Complete Tales. Complete. Everything complete. So, you know, one hopes they're in here. If not, it's probably too late to get the money back. Oh, yeah. Okay, so you recommend The Oval Portrait and Morella. Let's see if they're in here. The Oval Portrait is indeed in here. That's only 3 pages long. For a second there, I thought it was the one before, and I was like, hold on a minute. That's 11 pages. Do not tell me that's small. And, yeah. And Morella. Morella? You'd think one word would be a fairly... Oh, no, there we go. That's only 4 pages long. Okay, so those are what I call short stories. You know, half a dozen pages. You know. Some of them are a little bit longer than the 4 pages. Like Premature Burial's like 12 pages. That's not a short story, that's a novella. Which, for a novel, is short. Okay. Last of me energy drinks. And actually, it's poem time. So, Sausage, if you're still there, if you have a particular poem you want me to read you to sleep with. If not, actually, yeah, let's see if we can find a sleep poem. We've done Dream Within a Dream. Is there not a Dreamer poem? I'm sure there's a Dreamer poem. I remember there is a dreaming poem. I'm sure. The Sleeper. Or Dreamland. I knew this. Let's go to The Sleeper. $7.99. And we'll read The Sleeper. Top of it. Okay, The Sleeper. At midnight, in the month of June, I stand beneath the mystic moon. An opiate vapour, dewy, dim, exhales from out her golden rim, and softly dripping drop by drop upon the quiet mountain top, steals drowsily and musically into the universal valley. The rosemary nods upon the grave, the lily lolls upon the wave. Wrapping the fog about its breast, the ruin moulders into rest. Looking like leaf, see the lake, a conscious slumber seems to take. I would not for the world awake. All beauty sleeps, and lo, where lies a casement open to the skies, Irene with her destinies. O lady bright, can it be right, this window open to the night? The wanton airs from the treetop laughingly through the lattice drop. The bodiless airs a wizard rout flit through thy chamber in and out, and wave the curtain canopy so fitfully, so fearfully, above the closed and fringed lid, 'neath which thy slumbering soul lies hid, that o'er the floor and down the wall, like ghosts the shadows rise and fall. O lady dear, hast thou no fear? Why and what art thou dreaming here? Sure thou come o'er far off seas, I wander to these garden trees. Strange is thy pallor, strange thy dress, strange above all thy length of tress, and this all solemn silentness. The lady sleeps, O may her sleep, which is enduring, so be deep. Heaven have her in its sacred keep, this chamber changed for one more holy, this bed for one more melancholy. I pray to God that she may lie forever with unopened eye, while the dim-sheeted ghosts go by. My love, she sleeps, oh may her sleep, as it is lasting, so be deep. Soft may the worms about her creep, far in the forest, dim and old. For her may some tall vault unfold, some vault that oft hath flung its black and wicked panels fluttering back, triumphant o'er the crusted piles of her grand family funerals. Some sepulchre remote, alone, against whose portal she hath thrown in childhood many an idle stone, some tomb from out whose sounding door she ne'er shall force an echo more. Thrilling to think, poor child of sin, it was the dead who groaned within. Eternal sleeps, that one. Not quite sleeping. Hopefully not too bad for you, sausage. Rest thee well. Okay, we'll do one more last one and see what time we're at to. Because as much as I'm sending you all to sleep, I would like to go to sleep too. But this is a reward, so we're going to go for at least a couple hours because it seems a bit stingy not to. You guys paid the shinies. You can enjoy the reward. What we're going to do? I want to end on Telltale Heart. So before that, we were going to do... I forgot what one Nicole suggested. I remember now. No, not the Sphinx. The Oval Portrait, 249. See, this is what we call a short story, because I should be able to do it in, you know, only a few breaths. So Poe really does like his words. Yeah, see, 1 page, 2 page, 3. 2.5 pages. That is a short story. Future authors, you know, take note. He'll have used at least 3 full stops. Maybe 4. Okay, the Oval Portrait. The chateau into which my valet had ventured to make forcible entrance, rather than permit me, in my desperately wounded condition, to pass a night in the open air, was one of those piles of commingled gloom and grandeur which have so long frowned among the Apennines, not less in fact than in the fancy of Mrs. Radcliffe. That was all one sentence, Jesus. To all appearance, it had been temporarily and very lately abandoned. We established ourselves in one of the smallest and least sumptuously furnished apartments. It lay in a remote turret of the building. Its decorations were rich, yet tattered and antique. Its walls were hung with tapestry and bedecked with manifold and multiform armorial trophies, together with an unusually great number of very spirited modern paintings in frames of rich golden arabesque. In these paintings, which depended from the walls, not only in their main surfaces, but in very many nooks which the bizarre architecture of the chateau rendered necessary, in these paintings my incipient delirium perhaps had caused me to take deep interest, so that I bade Pedro to close the heavy shutters of the room, since it was already night, to light the tongues of a tall candelabrum which stood by the head of my bed, and to throw open far and wide the fringed curtains of black velvet which enveloped the bed itself. I wished all this done that I might resign myself, if not to sleep, at least alternately to the contemplation of these pictures, and the perusal of a small volume which had been found upon the pillow, and which purported to criticise and describe them. Long I read, and devoutly I gazed. Rapidly and gloriously the hours flew by, and the deep midnight came. The position of the candelabrum displeased me, and outreaching my hand with difficulty, rather than disturb my slumbering valet, I placed it so as to throw its rays more fully upon the book. But the action produced an effect altogether unanticipated. The rays of the numerous candles, for there were many, now fell within a niche of the room which had been hitherto thrown into a deep shade by one of the bedposts. I thus saw in vivid light a picture all unnoticed before. It was the portrait of a young girl, just ripening into womanhood. I glanced at the painting hurriedly, and then closed my eyes. Why I did this was not at first apparent even to my own perception, but while my lids remained thus shut, I ran over in my mind my reason for so shutting them. It was an impulsive movement to gain time for thought, to make sure that my vision had not deceived me, to calm and subdue my fancy for a more sober and more certain gaze. In a very few moments I again looked fixedly at the painting. That I now saw aright, I could not and would not doubt. For the first flashing of the candles upon the canvas had seemed to dissipate the dreamy stupor which was stealing over my senses, and to startle me at once into waking life. The portrait, I have already said, was that of a young girl. It was mere head and shoulders, done in what is technically termed a vignette manner, much in the style of the favourite heads of Sully. The arms, the bosom, and even the ends of the radiant hair melted imperceptibly into the vague yet deep shadow which formed the background of the whole. The frame was oval, richly gilded, and filigreed in Moresque. As a thing of art, nothing could be more admirable than a painting itself. But it could have been neither the execution of the work, nor the immortal beauty of the countenance, which had so suddenly and so vehemently moved me. Least of all could it have been that my fancy, shaken from its half-slumber, had mistaken the head for that of a living person. I saw at once the peculiarities of the design, of the vignetting, and of the frame, must have instantly dispelled such idea, must have prevented even its momentary entertainment. Thinking earnestly upon these points, I remained for an hour perhaps, half sitting, half reclining, with my vision riveted upon the portrait. At length, satisfied with the true secret of its effect, I fell back within the bed. I had found the spell of the picture in an absolute lifelikeness of expression, which at first startlingly, finally confounded, subdued, and appalled me. With deep and reverent awe, I replaced the candelabrum in its former position, the cause of my deep agitation being thus shut from view. I sought eagerly the volume which discussed the paintings and their histories. Turning to the number which designated the oval portrait, I there read the vague and quaint words which follow. She was a maiden of rarest beauty, and not more lovely than full of glee. And evil was the hour when she saw, and loved, and wedded the painter. He, passionate, studious, austere, and having already a bride in his art; she, a maiden of rarest beauty, and not more lovely than full of glee. All light and smiles, and frolicsome as the young fawn, loving and cherishing all things, hating only the art which was her rival, dreading only the palette and brushes and other untoward instruments which deprived her of the countenance of her lover. It was thus a terrible thing for the lady to hear the painter speak of his desire to portray her, even his young bride. But she was humble and obedient, and sat meekly for many weeks in a dark high turret chamber where the light dripped upon the pale canvas only from overhead. But he, the painter, took glory in his work, which went on from hour to hour and from day to day, and he was passionate and wild and moody man, who became lost in reveries, so that he would not see the light which fell so ghastly in that lone torrent, withered the health and the spirits of his bride, who pined visibly to all but him. Yet she smiled on and still on, uncomplainingly, because she saw that the painter, who had high renown, took a fervid and burning pleasure in his task, and wrought day and night to depict her who so loved him, yet who grew daily more dispirited and weak. And some who behold the And in sooth, some who beheld the portrait spoke of its resemblance in low words, as of a mighty marvel, and a proof not less of the power of the painter than of his deep love for her whom he depicted so surpassingly well. But at length, as the labour drew near its conclusion, there were admitted none into the turret, for the painter had grown wild with the ardour of his work, and turned his eyes from the canvas rarely, even to regard the countenance of his wife. And he would not see that the tints which he spread upon the canvas were drawn from the cheeks of her who sat beside him. And when many weeks had passed, and but little remained to do, save one brush upon the mouth, and one tint upon the eye, the spirit of the lady again flickered up as the flame within the socket of the lamp, and then the brush was given, and then the tint was placed, and for one moment the painter stood entranced before the work which he had wrought, but in the next, while he yet gazed, he grew tremulous, and very pallid, and aghast, and crying with a loud voice, "This is indeed life itself," turned suddenly to regard his beloved. She was dead. And there we have it. You know, don't spend your time taking photos, drawing and sketching your love. Enjoy your love. Like your love. You know, spend time with them. You might not always have that time. Ooh, I like that one too. It's quite poignant. I mean, I've got In the Hall of the Mountain playing at the same time, but yeah. It's kind of not the right tone. Glad we got it ended before it got too upbeat. I so should have proofread this sound list. I do apologise. Right, let's try this one. So probably a little bit more suited. This one's called Restless Dreams. And with that, let's go do another poem, and then we shall switch to Telltale Heart, and we're going to end it there. So we have one more poem. What poem should we do? I'm feeling Annabel Lee. That's only because there's one though. Annabel Lee or Ullalum are the two I'm leaning towards. The first one I see in chat. There we go, Ullalum. Of course Nicole's going to choose Ullalum. No, I was going to go with the first one chat said. And chat includes you, Nicole. So you chose 7883, Ullalumi. Ullalum, Ullalum, Ullalum. Well, that's not that long one. But I will freshen my palette. Because there are words in here which make my brain go, huh? Ah. Okay. Penultimate story / poem. It is a lovely poem. Okay. Ulume. And I apologise in advance for the mistakes I'm going to make. The skies, they were ashen and sober. The leaves, they were crisped and sere. The leaves, they were withering and sere. It was night in the lonesome October of my most immemorial year. It was hard by the dim lake of Auber, in the misty mid-region of Weir. It was down by the dank tarn of Auber, in the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. Here once through an alley titanic, of cypress I roamed with my soul, of cypress with Psyche my soul. These were days when my heart was volcanic, as the scoriac rivers that roll, as the lavas that restlessly roll, their sulphurous currents down Yannick, in the ultimate climes of the pole, that groan as they roll down Mount Yannick, in the realms of the boreal pole. Our talk had been serious and sober, but our thoughts, they were palsied and sere. Our memories were treacherous and sere, for we knew not the month was October, and we marked not the night of the year. Ah, night of nights in a year. We noted not the dim lake of Auber, though once we had journeyed down here. We remembered not the dank tarn of Auber, nor the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. And now, as the night was senescent, and star-dials pointed to morn, as the star-dials hinted of morn, at the end of our path a crescent, and nebulous lustre was born, out of which a miraculous crescent arose with a duplicate horn, Astarte's bediamonded crescent, distinct with its duplicate horn. And I said, she is warmer than Dian. She rolls through an ether of sighs. She revels in a region of sighs. She has seen that the tears are not dry on these cheeks where the worm never dies, and has come past the stars of the lion to point us the path to the skies, to the leaf-in peace of the skies. Come up in despite of the lion, to shine us with her bright eyes. Come up through the lair of the lion, with love in her luminous eyes. But Psyche, uplifting her finger, said sadly the star I mistrust. Her pallor I strangely mistrust. Oh hasten, oh let us not linger. Oh fly, let us fly, for we must. In terror she spoke, letting sink her wings until they trailed in the dust. In agony sobbed, letting sink her plumes till they trailed in the dust, till they sorrowfully trailed in the dust. I replied, this is nothing but dreaming. Let us on by this tremulous light. Let us bathe in this crystalline light. Its Sibyllic splendour, it's beaming with hope and in beauty tonight. See, it flickers up the sky through the night. We may safely trust to its gleaming, and be sure it will lead us aright. We safely may trust to a gleaming that cannot but guide us aright, since it flickers up to heaven through the night. Thus I pacified Psyche and kissed her, and tempted her out of her gloom, and conquered her scruples and gloom. And we passed to the end of the vista, but were stopped by the door of a tomb, by the door of a legended tomb. And I said, what is written, sweet sister, on the door of this legended tomb? She replied, Ulalume, Ulalume, 'tis the vault of thy lost Ulalume. Then my heart it grew ashen and sober, as the leaves that were crisped and sere, as the leaves that were withering and sere. And I cried, it was surely October, on this very night of last year, that I journeyed down here, that I brought a dread burden down here, on this night of all nights in a year. What demon has tempted me here? Well, I know now this dim lake of Auber, this misty mid-region of Weir. Well, I know now this dank town of Auber, this ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. I like that poem. That's got a nice rhythm cadence to it. And if I could safely read it and not screw that one up so badly. Mummy loved that so much. Mummy? Are you on the phone to your mother? Well that's supposed to be Well that's supposed to be lots of M's and an autocorrect. Either that or that's a one weird way of telling me that you're pregnant. One of these days it's actually going to be true and I'm going to be in trouble. Okay. We are going to refresh our palette and then we're going to end with The Telltale Heart, which is a medium length poem, and hopefully we'll get there in a reasonable time. Hell no. Oh, she doesn't want my children. I mean, don't blame her. Mini me's running around. Hell no. Mini her's running around. Hell no. Love you. Now, where's the Telltale Heart? It's going to be quite... Here we go. 203. I figured this would be fairly early. Because it's a great one. Okay. Let me find something a little bit more... I figure this is going to be as close as I'm going to get to applicable music. Ooh. Right, quick stretch because I'm going to need deep lungs and breaths for this one. And yep, we go into one final, The Telltale Heart. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I marred? Marred? Mad. Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all close, so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well within the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the task. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing on it steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears has ever since been growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim, and it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from out the crevice and full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now, have I not told you, what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the meeting grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbour. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only, and in an instant I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily, to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. He was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labours, it was 4 o'clock. still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbour during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted familiar things. But ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat, and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observation of the men, but the noise steadily increased. God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could hear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and now again, hark, louder, louder, louder. Villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more, I admit the deed. Tear up the planks, here, it's the beating of his hideous heart. And that was The Telltale Heart by Monsieur Edgar Allan Poe. Oh, and there, sadly, is where we are going to be ending this. Slightly over 2 hours of talking, and reading Poe is quite enough for me, I'm afraid, because even that one I have read several times, still stumble upon some choice of words and some stumblings and some pronunciations, because let's face it, this is Old English and no one uses it anymore. We've all become too Americanized, even though Edgar Poe himself lived in America. Somehow it's not enough. Okay, as is customary, let's see who we can raid out to. Who do we have live? We've got some Rabbit Girl playing Sea of Thieves. Rob's doing a behind screens. Jarls is playing What's Human again. And then I've got some partners, although technically speaking, Robert's a partner too. So yeah. So avoiding partners, we've got Jarls or Rabbit. Rob Squirrel and Jarls are all on. Or you have. But whatever you want. Nice. Okay. We'll do it based on viewer count. Who's got the lowest amount of viewers at the moment? Yep. Go Rabbit. It has been a while. And she's playing CVs, and we like CVs. So let's go raid Rabbit. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn the music off now because I don't know how loud it is for you, but it's much louder for me. Thank you very, very much for being here. I hope you enjoyed. As I say, it was your redeem, so you can do this sort of thing again. I'll try and pick someone less. What's the term I'm looking for? Less chatty. Much less chatty than Poe. Like someone who's a bit more distinct and to the point. But yeah, thank you all for being here. I'm going to start the raid. And yeah, that's about it. I will see you all in a fortnight. As I say, next week I do have to make some family visits. But outside of that, we should be good to back to our usual Sundays. So see you in a fortnight. And until then, take care. Thanks everyone for being here. Bye.